From the start of the First World War, Germany seized on Britain's greatest weakness, a vast empire, hard to defend, fatal to lose. The gamble was that Britain might risk everything to protect it, even victory on the Western Front. War for Europe meant war for the world. It was Germany's idea to take the war beyond Europe, but it wasn't a bid for expansion, let alone world domination. The aim was to take the pressure off her armies in Europe by attacking the British Empire, hoping to divert Britain's troops, ships and resources to defend distant colonies. Britain also had no thought of a bigger empire. She just didn't want to lose the one she had. So while Germany wanted to open the war up around the globe, Britain was desperate to close it down. Maurice Hankey, Secretary of the Committee of Imperial Defence, realised the empire was Britain's Achilles heel and warned against letting Germany use it to distract Britain from her war effort.
Forces must not be diverted to minor operations, to the prejudice of the concentration in the main theatre and the safety of the trade routes.
"15 years before, Germany had proclaimed herself an empire builder. The Kaiser had taken his country into the 20th century as a German admiral, creating a global German navy. Weltpolitik was the big idea, a policy of overseas imperialism, the brainchild of his foreign secretary, Bernhard von Bülow.
The days when the Germans left the earth to one neighbour, the sea to another, and kept only the heavens for themselves are over. We don't want to put anyone in the shade, but we too demand our place in the sun.
Germany had come late to the game of empires, but by 1900 she had Togoland, Cameroon, German Southwest Africa, now Namibia, and German East Africa, now Tanzania. Her flag flew over patches in the Pacific, New Guinea, Samoa, and Micronesia. She had a vital toehold in China, at Tsingtao, where she recoaled her ships and brewed beer. Grand Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz saw this as just the start.
We are now standing only at the beginning of a new division of the globe.
Germany alarmed the world with her imperial tub-thumping. She eyed up Puerto Rico and considered pouncing on the Panama Canal the minute it was completed. But the boldest of all the Kaiser's schemes was Operational Plan 3.
The East Coast is the heart of the United States, and this is where she is most vulnerable. New York will panic at the prospect of bombardment. By hitting her here, we can force America to negotiate.
Germany's secret plans from 1903 to attack the eastern seaboard with 60 ships and 100,000 men, to shell Manhattan and capture Boston. The outlandish scheme was driven by the Kaiser's resentment of America's growing power in the Pacific. He believed in a militarist state and increasingly hated what the West stood for.
Service to mammon, greed, self-indulgence, land-grabbing, lying, treachery, and not least murder.
The Kaiser thought capitalism was vulnerable, that a strong enough attack on its international systems of trade, credit and insurance could bring the edifice tumbling down. Operational Plan 3 was dropped, but not the hostility towards capitalist empires. By 1912, Germany had traded in Weltpolitik for a more realistic policy. Now, her military machine prepared for a European, not a global war, and the army got the budget increase, not the navy. The first day of war found Germany's high seas fleet trapped by the mighty British Navy in the North Sea. And all the German Navy had to threaten the entire British Empire was a scattered force of 17 cruisers linked by a wireless network to Berlin. There was the Königsberg off East Africa, the Goeben and the Breslau in the Mediterranean, the Dresden and the Karlsruhe in the West Indies, the Leipzig off the west coast of America. But the greatest concentration of cruisers was Admiral Graf von Spee's powerful East Asiatic Squadron, based at Tsingtao in China. Tsingtao gave Germany a huge area of operations, across the South China Sea and into the Pacific. Seizing it would cut the squadron's lifeline. Britain saw the urgency, but lacked the resources. So, 2 days into the war, she turned to her ally Japan. Japan was a growing power. Britain's call for naval help suited her ambitions perfectly. Together, Britain and Japan would capture Tsingtao, vital German base, and the Kaiser's pride and joy.
It would shame me more to surrender Tsingtao to the Japanese than Berlin to the Russians.
On the 2nd of September 1914, 60,000 Japanese troops landed up the coast, violating China's neutrality. They met up with 2,000 British and closed in on the German garrison of 4,500.
It's unbearable. All we can do is sit and wait for this bunch of monkeys to arrive. Every day they get a bit closer. No one expects to get home in one piece. No hope of reinforcements. The noose around our necks is getting tighter and tighter.
For a solid week, the Japanese battered Tsingtao. On the 7th of November, they entered the town in triumph. Some Germans sneered at the token British force, forgetting the Japanese to do their dirty work.
The brave British. They played no part in the capture of Tsingtao, but they joined in the victory parade. As they went by, we Germans were ordered to turn our backs on them. The English complained to the Japanese commander, but he simply said, well, we can't repeat the whole procession just because of that.
The capture of Tsingtao gave Japan a launch pad to pursue her empire building. Within weeks, she demanded territory and trading rights from China. Japan also seized all German possessions north of the equator. Australia and New Zealand were quick to steal those to the south. Much to America's frustration, Britain had empowered Japan in the Pacific. Key stage in a process that would lead, a quarter of a century later, to Pearl Harbor. Germany's loss of Tsingtao, far from neutralizing Spee's squadron, ensured its destructive power would be felt around the globe. The best German cruiser commanders, like Spee, were fearless mavericks, whom the war turned into heroes. Superb sailors with the instincts of pirates. The Kaiser had given them full authority to make their own decisions in wartime.
The heavy responsibility of the officer in command will be increased by the isolated position of his ship. But he must never show one moment of weakness. Above all, the officer must bear in mind that his chief duty is to damage the enemy as severely as possible.
Spee now split his squadron. The light cruiser Emden, under Captain Karl von Müller, made for the Bay of Bengal. Spee in the Scharnhorst led his other ships across the Pacific.
I'm quite homeless. I cannot reach Germany. I must plough the seas of the world, doing as much mischief as I can.
At the Admiralty in London, Winston Churchill fretted about where Spee would show up next.
The vastness of the Pacific and its multitude of islands offered him their shelter. And once he had vanished, who should say where he would reappear? He was a cut flower in a vase, fair to see, yet bound to die. But so long as he lived, all our enterprises lay under the shadow of a serious potential danger.
Spee had a constant worry. Cruisers needed coal every 8 or 9 days or they'd be dead in the water. He made for neutral Chile, where he had coal waiting for him. On the 1st of November 1914, he ran into a British fleet off Coronel. The battle which followed inspired a post-war feature film. The British commander was Admiral Sir Christopher Cradock, under orders from London.
It appears that Gneisenau and Scharnhorst are working across to South America. Be prepared to meet them in company.
Cradock had one ship that could outgun Spee's fleet, but she was slow and had been left behind. Now Cradock raced towards enemy ships better armed than his. He had ignored his own rule of thumb.
A naval officer should never let his boat go faster than his brain.
I immediately ordered Scharnhorst and Gneisenau to go full steam ahead, and within 15 minutes I was racing against heavy seas at 20 knots and came to lie parallel with him.
Cradock's ships were no match for Spee's.
Good Hope and Monmouth were obviously in distress. Monmouth yawed off to starboard, burning furiously. There was a terrible explosion on Good Hope between her mainmast and her after funnel. The gust of flames reached a height of over 200 feet, lighting up a cloud of debris that was flung still higher in the air.